Yellowjackets is back for its second season, and friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Get your voice changers and your punch kits ready because we got a full new season incoming.
That's not necessary. I'll just take that one, Steve.
Season 2 starts with an opening that's equal parts haunting and lovely, paired with the song 17 by Sharon Van Etten, which is a bit of a swerve since it's not a 90s song, but it is from a New Jersey native that would have likely been a few years behind the Yellowjackets if they went to school together. And the lyrics are quite fitting because you can't go back and help your younger self become the person you are now. We all have to learn as we go, and the Yellowjackets are learning what full-on lake is frozen over winter is like in the Canadian wilderness. We go from an overhead shot of the unforgiving outdoors to find the survivors huddled together on the floor in front of the fire. It's clear things probably haven't improved much in the 2 months since the season 1 finale. I mean, I don't know how much extra heat you get from stuffing porno mags under your coat, but you don't get to the place where you're ready to do that if you're entirely comfortable. One of the first things that jumps out, though, is that Van and Ty have found a working solution to keep her from sleepwalking by tying their wrists together while they sleep, which shows us that the group is working through the problems they're coming up against. Natalie and Travis are up before the others and getting ready to head out, but before they go, Lottie performs a simple ritual that involves her pricking her finger and adding some of her blood to a concoction she's brewed. The way they react to this is notable considering some time has passed since she dropped that bear in the finale. Travis is desperate because Javi is still missing and seems okay with anything Lottie wants to give him that might help. But Nat, who is fearing the day that Travis gets confirmation that his brother's dead, doesn't want anyone or anything to get his hopes up. When she pushes back, Lottie makes a point that they can't argue with. They have been coming back alive, haven't they? And as they walk off, Lottie draws the strange symbol with her finger in the frosted window. The thing about this ritual here is that it feels like she's just sort of making it up as she goes along. She's just drawing on her limited experience with things. I mean, she is a teenager after all, and she's just doing whatever seems like it might possibly help them out in this situation. Then we flash forward to a third timeline where they get rescued in 1998. There aren't many useful details in what we see here, but it is still exciting in the same way the Pit Girl scene was last season. Obviously, we knew the main characters would eventually be rescued, so this is here to set up the introduction of the adult Lottie in 2021. The two details that did catch my attention here were that Nat's original hair color finally grew back out, and that you don't see Shauna or anyone else carrying a baby. Misty looks like the only one who's enjoying the attention they're getting at the airport, and a little bit later, Lottie turns and lets out this scream that probably sums up the experience they just shared fairly succinctly. The song 17 kicks back in as we witness the struggle that she has in her eyes, and we hear her father ask a doctor if they can fix her. Remember, after the crash when she was a child, her mother was sympathetic and thought she might actually be having premonitions, but her father was quick to have her medicated. And we see her go through that again, only this time with electroshock therapy thrown in for good measure. As she's receiving that, we see flashbacks of the vision she had in the lake with Laura Lee, and as she's experiencing that, the lyrics of the song say, "I used to feel free, or was it just a dream?" In her room, she comforts another patient who is hearing voices by putting her hand on her chest like she'll do to Travis later, and she tells her they'll make you better the same way they helped me. In the present, it appears that she's turned this ability into a thriving self-help business, if not a cult. Beyond what she says, and the fact that everyone that's there who's hanging on her every word is wearing a shade of purple, which is contrasted by her fiery colors, there isn't much to say about how she got from point A to point B, or why none of the other survivors mentioned her in the 2021 timeline. Apparently this retreat is in upstate New York, and we do learn that her followers were responsible for kidnapping Natalie in the closing minutes of the finale and bringing her there. She doesn't take to being held captive though, and manages to stab her way out of it after she convinces the young follower to undo one of her hands so that she can eat. She makes a break for it and finds Lottie in the middle of a ritual that has some similarities to the Antler Queen sequence from season 1, especially those animal masks. I read this as some sort of rebirthing, where the man they're burying is likely simulating the death of his old self, in preparation for being reborn into this group, or I guess we could just probably say cult. Natalie confronts her with some real rage, but Lottie is able to calm her down by telling her that she has a message from Travis. In the past, those two spend most of their time together hiking in the area around the cabin, searching for hobby. Nat is also drawing maps that Coach Ben is helping her compile, and he points out what seems fairly obvious. After all this time, Javi is almost certainly dead. And it's funny because all the evidence points so soundly in that direction that I find myself questioning it. Like, I think there has to be more to it. Towards the end of the episode, there's a shot where Nat and Travis are passing by a tree and they stop, and I'm not exactly sure what they see. It's green around the base, which is weird because of the winter, and there are some sticks that are broken there maybe. But after she says that it's weird, he just tells her to move on. And I've rewatched it a couple of times, and I didn't have a direct epiphany, but it does feel related to the stump he sees when Lottie helps him with his panic attack and the vision that he has. In that, there's also some candles, which bring to mind Lottie's vision of the tunnel, so this all may start to make sense later. When Lottie notices his erection, she tells him that she knows his brother's alive. And that, and maybe both of those things working together, sets Nat off. One last thing about the stump, this green area that they see is by a tree. The tree doesn't really look alive. When Lottie places the bear's heart in that stump, it looks like it's dead. But the one in Travis's vision looks lush, so I don't know. Maybe there's a connection to that rebirthing ritual that Lottie's doing in the present. We're going to have to wait and see. Elsewhere in the present day timeline, Thaisa adopts an amazingly cute new puppy to try to get back into good graces with her family. Things start to feel pretty uncomfortable for Steve when Simone brings up what happened to their last dog, Biscuit. She tells her about finding the altar at their house, and that if she doesn't resign from her new post and get help for whatever it is that's happening to her, that she'll go to the press and expose it. And when Ty goes home, she finds Biscuit's remains, and poor Steve has to see that too. I don't necessarily believe her when she tells him she'll do better, considering she doesn't remember what she does when she sleepwalks. But hopefully they'll use that as a way they can mess with us, knowing that we're going to feel that way about Steve, instead of adding to her body count. Back in 1996, we watch her relationship with Van continue to grow to the point that they confess their love. Van does this after she wakes up from a bite from a sleeping Ty, and after she declares she's not afraid of her, and never will be, she uses the blood to write I love you on her arm. Beyond the whole putting herself in danger to stay close to her lover thing, this is also a little bittersweet because we know adult Van isn't in Thaisa's life currently. We know a split is coming, but then I guess we also know we'll be meeting the adult Van in 2021 this season, so a reunion is also coming as well. It feels a little more crowded in the cabin because some of the mysterious survivors that occasionally wandered in and out of scenes last season now have names and speaking parts. Most notably, Misty's potential new best friend and possible source of her interest in show tunes, Crystal. I wouldn't go as far as saying making a joke about how the others didn't pay attention to them counts as skillfully handling their introduction, but I suppose when they realized they were going to add more survivors to the adult lineup, they needed some additional red shirts for tension in the cabin scenes. As I've mentioned, there were at least 6 survivors that never had names and never did much, and now they're integrated right in there with the rest of them. Having Crystal as a friend seems great for Misty, who is basically still being bullied by the main women because of the shrooms, and just generally being Misty. You do have to worry about how it might not be such a great deal for Crystal, though, who seems nice but awkward, which might make her susceptible to being led astray by Miss Quigley. One thing I noticed in the new opening credits was a shot of the flight recorder, which was Misty's big secret in Season 1. And I could see things going wrong if she confided about destroying that, because I think she would probably go to any lengths if she was worried that her new friend might expose her. Adult Misty continues to be the standout character in that timeline. In this episode, she tries to help coach Shauna for a potential police interrogation. has a great exchange with the guy at the motel where Nat was staying when she goes looking for her, and then discovers that her room was broken into. Perhaps the funniest moment in the episode is when she downvotes Elijah Wood's post on the Citizen Detectives board, and I do hope we get to meet his character in the next installment. Considering she noticed the camera outside in Nat's room, it seems likely she'll be getting to the bottom of her disappearance. There was no mention of Jessica Roberts' death, but they did show it in the pre-episode recap, so I assume that will come up in the next couple of episodes. In contrast, Adam's death was all over adult Shauna's side of things in that part of the story. We watched how it's affecting things with her and Jeff, and ultimately what might turn out to be more important, how it's affecting things with her daughter Callie. When she finds a sketch of herself with Adam's things that she had stashed in her safe, things she did a pretty half-hearted job of lying about to Misty, and the key to his art studio. She put 2 and 2 together and realized there might be things there that would put her on the police's radar. When they go, it turns out she was right, probably more right than she could have guessed, because her likeness is all over his current body of work. This is a bad development, all things considered, but it also works to turn her and her husband on, and they take time out for some steamy sex before they use turpentine to erase her face from the paintings. This seems like a decent plan, as opposed to being seen carrying them outside, but it might also be a little suspicious to anyone who knew what was on those paintings if they discovered that this happened well after he disappeared. After an entertaining interlude with Jeff rocking out in the car, they also decide to burn the rest of Adam's personal effects and Shauna's journals. In the process, they almost burn down the tree in their backyard, but they make an even bigger mistake when they don't check or clean out the ashes. Callie is open about her suspicions throughout the episode, and when she decides to check the grill, she finds what's left of Adam's driver's license. In almost every way, the more interesting Shauna is the teen version, and I think her part of this story is the most compelling thing in this episode. Not just for what happens at the end, but also for how it informs us of the transformation that the characters are experiencing through the one who is in the middle of an acute identity crisis. As she plays mansion apartment shack house with her dead friend, it becomes clear that she can't let go of her because she doesn't know who she is without her. It's that odd type of connection you only really have in your teenage years, and one that would only be intensified if you were, say, stranded in the woods fighting to survive and running out of bear meat. It's one of those character moments that just sort of work, because even if you've never been a teenage girl who is pregnant with your dead best friend's boyfriend's baby, a death you feel responsible for, by the way, you can still understand having complicated feelings about something you care about in a deep way. And loss and borderline starvation and a diminishing hope of getting rescued all conspire to make Shauna and Jackie's chats in the meat shack all that more interesting. She goes through it, and then in one of the most delightful decisions they've made, they have her body fall over in a way that knocks her ear off. The big question in this show has not been if they would resort to cannibalism. We knew they would do that based on the Pit Girl teaser. But how they resorted to cannibalism and the circumstances under which that played out were the real question. Because her body was there, it seemed likely that Jackie would be the bridge they crossed to get to that place. But I would have never guessed it would play out like this. My initial reaction when I saw her pocket the ear was that this will be Eaton. When it actually happened, I thought, well, that makes sense because she's pregnant and hungry. But when you think about it more, it also ties in with the feelings she has for her. Those are complicated and probably go back and forth between hating her to wanting to be her. In this situation, it isn't a huge jump to get to wanting to consume her, to have her be a part of you, but then also to no longer exist. Don't get me wrong, it's wild, and the crunching sound of what I guess is cartilage is something that will stick in my memory for some time. And it also adds an extra layer because of her pregnancy. Strange cravings are really common, so there are a lot of different directions they can go from here. One major question was answered, while giving us a ton of new ones to ponder. Season premieres are always tough because there's a lot of setup, and this one had more to handle than just reintroducing the huge cast of characters straddling the two timelines. I don't think this one will be remembered as one of the best episodes of the series, but I think most of the weaker aspects, like the inclusion of the new characters, will be easy to overlook as the story picks up. It's not ideal, but the way you solve that problem is to make them compelling characters. My main issue the first time I watched the first season was that I didn't care much for the scenes in the present. I like the idea of showing how all of what happened to them in the woods informs who they are, but I just kept finding myself wanting to get back to the cabin because what was happening there was way more compelling. This was, I think, the best example of the two storylines actively enhancing each other in a way where in real time I could overlook what wasn't working in the present because of how it was connected to what I was watching in the past. Two examples stand out. First, adult Shauna, and to a lesser extent, Kole. On its own, I think most of what happens in the present with Shauna is kind of frustrating to watch because what is she actually doing? Does she feel bad about killing her lover who didn't turn out to be her blackmailer? Is she struggling with that and that's why she seems so nonchalant? If she was afraid she was going to go to prison, wouldn't there be some urgency in the way that she was handling things? It was hard to parse. But as they filled in the blanks with what was going on in the past and found an absolutely novel way to move them closer to eating each other, I got the sense that it would probably be worth the wait. And Kole works as an audience surrogate here because she's right there, she's next to all of this going down, and she can't make sense of it either. I thought it was a revelation about her character that she kissed Jeff first and initiated the whole affair. The question then is, what does that tell us about what's going on with her in the present day? If nothing else, it probably makes the whole getting it on in your dead ex-lover's studio before destroying some evidence make more sense. The other thing is Lottie. We can't know the details of what happened while they were stranded before we meet the adult version, who is pretty far away from where the teenager is. So getting to see her ordeal post-rescue gives some shape to that. In 96, we can see that she's not exactly making moves to be the leader of the survivors. Most of her motivation seems to be tied to wanting to help. Seeing her sitting next to her father as he says, "Can you fix her?" I mean, she's sitting right there in front of you. It takes the edge off of the Antler Queen persona, which is at least a little bit sinister. So there are a lot of questions now about how she becomes who she is. It's hard to trust that she might still be a good person in her life as a cult leader. That profession has a pretty low batting average when it comes to that sort of thing, but she might be carrying some of that idea of wanting to help that she discovered when she was a teenager. So a good episode with a great ending. Some juicy new character details, lots of new stuff set up, and an answer to the question of how the cannibalism ball starts rolling. I read somewhere that one of the creators said that eating the ear was like baby steps on the path to cannibalism. When you start there, you can't tell for sure if this will turn out to be something that she'll secretly add to the meat that she's giving to the others. Or maybe her cravings will kick in and she'll just take little bites now and then. Little bites that won't really make a difference. And then what happens when other people find out? Or maybe she eats the whole thing without sharing and then the others get to the place where they're ready to eat her and find out that she isn't there. On top of that, we got some great musical choices and some laughs to balance out all the impending darkness hanging over things. Plenty to contemplate with adult Lottie showing up, what she has for Nat in relation to Travis, and just how their reunion will play out. Things could be more complicated, and there could be possible leftover bad feelings if the future Antler Queen keeps inspiring his little soldier to stand at attention back in the cabin. The hobby thing really shouldn't be so interesting. For all intents and purposes, he should not be able to survive out there. He would either need to meet other people, or there would have to be something supernatural in play because he just wasn't cut out for what survival would entail. I saw the idea that maybe there was something underground near the tree where they stopped, but if that was the case, how would that be in any way a viable place to hide for a couple of months in the dead of winter? Again, there would have to be other people or other forces in play, which I wouldn't be opposed to, but there would have to be something before I could see how that would make sense. Still, saying that, the certainty of his death seems so absolute that I do kind of think it will go the other way. There's a lot I'm looking forward to at this point, including Adult Van's introduction and seeing how Elijah Wood's character plays into Misty's story. In theory, and based on that downvote, they should be in opposition to each other, but at the same time, we all know how Misty is, so I'm guessing it will go in the opposite direction. The new opening credits had some stuff that deserves a closer look, and I know I saw a lot of people mention the lyric from Tori Amos's Cornflake Girl that played right before Shauna ate Jackie's ear, where it says, "Things are getting kinda gross," which to be fair was quite good, but I thought it stood out that the last thing we hear before the episode ends is, this is not really happening, and I hope things get weirder from here. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.